All right, so a lot of the, I guess, confusion or kind of the skepticism about training at 75% is that it's so easy. And honestly, the key component here is that basically any endurance coach or any endurance protocol typically suggests that bulk of your training is going to be in zone 2, and zone 2 is going to be an easy training pace. But what is easy is very subjective based upon the athlete. A really motivated athlete could think easy is actually running close to lactate threshold, when a lazy athlete thinks easy is basically a walk. So it's a super subjective thing, especially with athletes in our gym. They seem to struggle with what is easy versus what is actually a higher intensity because they're so accustomed to doing so much high intensity, okay? There's actually, right here, 8 ways to kind of establish zone 2. And I'm sure there's more. These are the ones that I found so far. And for me, I found that all of them are a little bit different, but there is a common theme there. So let's go over these 8 real fast. The first one is percentage of max heart rate. That was why we did that max heart rate test. Now, I'm questioning the validity of that max heart rate test. I feel like if we waited and did a 30-minute pre-fatigue, it would probably be a little bit better. A lot of athletes had difficulty finding a true max heart rate. So if we use 75%, that might be a little bit lower than they should be using. That is one method for me that yielded 138 beats per minute with a max heart rate of 185. Second method is something called the Maffetone method. You basically take, I think, 180 minus your age, and that gives you the top end of your zone 2. For me, that's 142 beats per minute, which 138 falls below that. So that's a pretty good one for me. 3 is the aerobic field test that we did. Take that aerobic threshold and then minus 10% and creates a zone. When I did this, that gave me a zone of 135 to 151. Pretty close to the 138. That 142 is in there as well. But we had really mixed results with that aerobic field test, and I am not confident using that to establish a training zone. The size of your nostrils, how clear your nasal passages are, so many things, your perceived effort of what is hard and comfortable can all skew that number. The fourth one, which is the one you guys are doing right now, is a timed 5K. You can use previous run performance or race performance to establish training zones. Now, the downside of this is that something like a 5K, you don't have to be extremely aerobically developed. You can have a very high anaerobic system that's developed and still move fairly quickly, which is a good example of most of us, I would say. If I did a timed 5K, it'd probably be right around 21 minutes right now if I had to guess, which means my zone 2 would be a 8:30 to a 9:30, and my 138 falls in that category, okay? Another one is a lactate field test, very similar to this right here. We're not actually gonna probably do that one. You guys just use a timed 5K. But basically you're trying to establish lactate threshold over a period of time, and then that'll give you a heart rate range as well. I did a gas exchange test. Now the idea of a gas exchange test is that it's gonna measure the amount of fats and carbohydrates that you are utilizing, and at some point you're gonna shift. In those lower intensities, you're basically gonna be using primarily fats, and then sugars will be here, and at some point those lines are gonna cross, and those sugars are gonna take over as the predominant energy system. Coaches like to say that, hey, fat utilization is important, and where these two lines cross, which is 50% carbs and 50% fats, can be theoretically your aerobic threshold. Mine was much lower than expected, 124 beats when I did this. That means I have tons of room to grow aerobically speaking, okay? I did an LT lab test as well, as when you're basically running at different efforts, they prick your ear and they're measuring the amount of lactate in your blood. Lactate threshold is a number that we can use to determine our training zones. For me, now there is a lot of kind of vague definitions of what exactly lactate threshold is as far as how many millimeters per liter, et cetera, et cetera. What we used in there was actually for a marathon athlete, so this one's gonna be a little bit higher, but roughly around 155 beats per minute is where I start to accumulate more lactate. It rises very quickly. For me, that's gonna translate into a training zone of 132 to 141. The final one, which I would definitely not have any of you guys do, is a rated perceived exertion. They use something called the Borg scale. It's a 6 to 20 scale, and that 6 to 20 basically corresponds with 60 beats per minute to 200 beats per minute. And the idea is that the endurance training zone should be very easy to easy, which typically corresponds with about 110 beats to 130 beats. So the key idea that is I've extrapolated now from all this information is that for me to train aerobically, I need to be right around 130 to 140 beats per minute is going to be kind of a safe zone. I can get down to 125, that's gonna be okay too. Can probably go as high as 145, it's still a very, very comfortable pace for me, but right now, my personal goal is to teach my body to utilize fats more efficiently. So, if I was to draw a little picture, okay, this would be my fat usage, and then this would be my sugar usage. Right now, at 124 beats per minute is where they cross. That's very low. I would like that to be at about 150 beats per minute. Elite athletes are in the 160 range, okay? So for me to get this number to really move over to the right and make the line look more like this, I'm gonna need to train at a low intensity. Once that number moves to the right, which is the purpose of this base training, then I can add in high intensity stuff and focus on increasing my lactate threshold. So it's a step one, step two kind of thing, guys. Obviously this is gonna be more important for me, for my specific endeavors, but for timed 5Ks, maybe even 10Ks, how far this shifts over may not be as important, but you still need to build that base. We still need to build capillary density, mitochondrial density. We still need aerobic enzymes. We need to condition the body to move over ground. So this is kind of like part of the Space Monkey program, is the idea of going through all these different methods and finding out what's going to be the most appropriate method to establish zone 2. The key thing is, I think for most athletes, if you're going to be in that 130 to 140 range, you're probably in the right zone, okay? Once you cross 140, now we're kind of like, well, we're starting to get into high aerobic. We get to 150, we're definitely there, all right? Plenty of information online, plenty of books to read. You guys can research. You can also email me if you got questions. But always make sure to read the emails and watch the videos before you do so.